Hello and a warm welcome. Thank you for joining us in this LIBER 2020 online session entitled Crowd-Powered Collaboration. My name is Anna London and I'm the head of the division at the National Library of Sweden coordinating libraries. I'm also a member of the LIBER program committee, so I have had the pleasure to read many of these papers that are being presented during the LIBER conference. So first, let me start with some housekeeping notes before we get started. This session is being recorded, so we will share the recording and slides afterwards. We'll be running a live Q&A at the end of the session after all presenters have given their talk. And if you want to ask a question, please send it through via the chat window at any time, the attendee chat at the left. Following the session, you will receive a link to a short survey. Please fill it out. We welcome any feedback. If you're missing anything, as I said in the beginning, we are recording the session, so also the slides will be made available. And as many of you know, this is the first time that LIBER is running an annual conference completely online. So we hope that this session runs smoothly, but we have had speakers with some problems to connect. So we will change the order of the speakers in order to try to make that work. But we ask for your patience in any case of technical glitches. So, moving on to the session, I will start with giving the word and the stage to Danish colleagues. Thomas Karsted, a co-worker with Anne-Katrine Overgaard from University of Southern Denmark, will present together with Christian Nielsen Whitfeldt and Torbjørn Esbjørn Argaard from University of Aarhus. And their talk is entitled Creating a Single Contact Point for Citizen Science, the Demands of Researcher and the Role for Research Libraries. So please welcome Torbjørn and Thomas. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you very much for having us speaking today on this very wonderful summer day, I think. So thank you for the very nice introduction. As you just noted, this is a joint presentation between Thomas and I. Thomas will, in the second part, be talking about what research libraries can offer to citizen science field. While in the first part, I'll tell you some insights from the DEF projects that we have been involved in as researchers at the Center for Science Studies in Aarhus. Can I navigate the slides? Yes, I can. Good. So the DEF project is supported by DEF is Denmark's electronic research libraries, and they supported our project on exploring the Danish citizen science landscape. So we had 3 aims of our contribution to this project. The first was to map the citizen science landscape in terms of ongoing projects, in terms of actors involved, and in terms also of publications patterns. We also, by means of a survey, which I will tell you more about, wanted to identify some opportunities, needs, and challenges to the development of the citizen science in Denmark in the future. And finally, we also wanted to identify a role for research libraries in developing, shaping the field, the citizen science field. So I will mainly here talk about briefly discuss with you how citizen science in Denmark look like, and then I will go on to talk about the third point here in locating or identifying a role for research libraries in the future developments. Describing citizen science in Denmark is a very difficult task, in particular if you only have 2 minutes. I mean, citizen science in Denmark is definitely not just one thing, and it's a very growing field. It's growing both in terms of projects and in terms of actors involved and in terms of activities here. But we do see some common patterns for example, that many of the projects going on right now are rooted in the disciplinary field of nature and biodiversity. For example, there's a project here called the Insect Mobile, where citizens can help researchers monitoring insects by driving around with these fancy nets monitored on their car. And if a citizen catches a wolf, then they are even more lucky, because there are also some crowd-based collaborations between citizens and researchers in wolf monitoring. And this is particularly a hot topic here in Denmark, since the wolf reappeared in the Danish Nature in 2012. However, we also see projects in other disciplinary fields, like, for example, health sciences, literature, and cultural heritage. And Thomas will get back to talk more about that in the second part, so I'll leave that to him. Most projects are still organized mainly by research institutions and also big NGOs, like, for example, the Danish BirdLife organization. But we also see the emerging tendencies of more and more actors joining the organizing of projects, like, for example, media organizations, private companies, and also research libraries. And Thomas will definitely come back to talk more about that in the second part. Okay, last year was a big year for citizen science in Denmark, because first of all, we had the funding of establishment of the very first national citizen science network, and they helped organizing the very first Danish citizen science symposium, which took place in Odense in the autumn last year. So definitely a growing field, and I think this is also a nice visualization of the growth that the field is experiencing. This is the amount of annual publications that are registered in the Danish research database that apply the term citizen science in abstracts or in the title. And you can see in particular during the last 5 years, there's been an immense growth of these publications, from 2 in 2014 to 32 in 2019. So a growing field indeed, and that is also one of the motivations why we wanted to hear from people who are part of the present developments of the field and might be also in the future, and wanted to get their feedback on their experiences of the field. So earlier this year, we conducted a survey which we circulated to research librarians, and what we designate as people who are active or interested in the citizen science field. This could be, for example, people who are organizing projects, or members of the Citizen Science Network, or students in a citizen science course that took place on the University of Aarhus last autumn. All people that we think can play a big role in citizen science in the future, if they are not already playing it today. So we recruited respondents to this survey via email invitations, and we acknowledge that perhaps we did not reach all the respondents by potential respondents that we wanted to hear from if we just invited them via email. But we were so lucky that some of the respondents were very helpful at distributing the survey via social media and email networks, so we get an even greater outreach of our survey. 187 respondents initiated the survey, and 114 of those joined via email invitations. So that's a pretty good share, we think. We did ask more general questions about how they perceive the citizen science field and how they are engaged in the field and the interest in the field. But I will here only pertain to the part of the survey that concerned research libraries and their potential role in the citizen science field. So that was the last section of questions in the survey, and we thought that not all respondents felt comfortable about answering these questions. Maybe they were not familiar with research libraries, so we asked them whether they wanted to answer this section of questions, and luckily we had 114 respondents who wanted to do that. Just below half of them were employed at research libraries, and just below 2/3 of them knew or were familiar with citizen science initiatives and projects to which research libraries have already contributed. So that's nice to have in mind when I show you the last slides here, where I share with you 2 results from the survey. So first, we asked a bunch of mixed questions pertaining to whether whether the respondents thought that contribution of research libraries to citizen science would be a good thing, you can say. And you can see particular question 1 and 2, almost neither of our research disagreed to the statement that research libraries should give high priority to citizen science, and neither of our respondents disagreed to the statement that research that would be beneficial for citizen science if research libraries contributes. So, I mean, this, at least among our respondents, show a great deal of interest. I mean, of course, some of our respondents articulated concerns about whether research libraries at this point have the necessary competencies or financial resources to contribute to citizen science. But overall, I think this is a very positive message indicating that there's a great deal of interest in research libraries contributing to citizen science. Okay. So how should the research libraries then contribute? Well, we dived a bit into the literature and asked our librarian friends in order to come up with a list of tasks that we think that research libraries can perform in order to support the future development of citizen science. And then we asked the respondents to rank these tasks according to how important they find them. You can see all the tasks here. Number 1 to 3, you can say, pertain mostly to communicating and teaching citizen science, while question 4, 5, and 6 are more on the facilitating side. Okay, so interpreting the total sum of responses that we got is maybe a bit a difficult task, but we have tried. We have not ranked, but we have listed the task here according to the average ranking among all our respondents. And you can see here that there's actually a clear-cut winner, we'll say. So our respondents find the task of communicating citizen science to researchers and students most important. And then comes a close race between the task of data management and strengthening citizen science collaboration between disciplinary fields. And number 4, communicating citizen science to the public. 5 and 6 were found less important by the respondents in general, but you can see still teaching citizen science and organizing, managing citizen science projects was rated the most important by some respondents, at least. Okay, and I acknowledge I'm running a bit out of time, so I'll skip the last slide and go straight away to the conclusion and what we have learned from our project. So we have learned definitely that citizen science in Denmark is a diverse field encompassing many different activities. Even though we have many projects on biodiversity, we also have some new trends on projects from other disciplinary fields that you can say challenge these old patterns. And exactly the growth in the complexity of citizen science in Denmark puts up, you can say, new demands, puts up new tasks that need to be addressed if the field is going to move on in the future. And this is exactly the reason why we suggest that there should be a single point of contact that may be able to facilitate the performance of such tasks and the meeting of these demands. Such a single point of contact is might be situated on a research library. We find to be an interesting prospect, especially given the interest in the contribution of research libraries, and also the fact that research libraries can perform many of these tasks. So I think with the picture of the demanding wolf, I think it is a good time to leave the word to Thomas, who will go on in the second part of our presentation.
Thank you, Torben. I think a very crucial point here is that some of the work that Torben and Christian have achieved so far, and which aligns beautifully with some of the literature, among others by Tiberius, which is presenting a little later with Bertil, but also Paul Eris and others, is the single point of contact and the possible role of research libraries. So I will briefly, in my presentation together with Anne-Katrine Overgaard, who made it with me, briefly present some context, how we work with citizen science, demonstrate a few examples of exactly what Torben just showed, that although biology and natural science are a core of citizen science, there are emerging fields. And in the end, discuss, based on Christian and Torben's work and also the recent article Built to Last by Tiberius and Paul Eris, how could research libraries and how could we in practice do this? I am presenting, at least in name, with Anne-Katrine Overgaard, my very good colleague from SDU, who has made the presentation with me and who is running the Citizen Science Network at SDU. The main thing to see here is that Anne-Katrine is not a librarian, and the work we do at SDU is a collaboration, a partnership between the faculties, in this case health science and others, together with the university library. And I think that is a crucial point that I have stated a number of times, that libraries can, if not easily, commit to partnerships with faculty. Very briefly, citizen science at SDU. Since 2017, we have run 12 citizen science projects and have 4 or 5 in the pipeline. And I think a very important point to put in here is that SDU, my university, in 2019 committed as perhaps the first university to the UN SDGs. And while that is important, is that there are some clear-cut lines to citizen science, which I will come to in a moment. But at SDU, it's extremely important to underline that the university wants to create value by working towards the sustainability goals. We will develop skills and capabilities and innovate to benefit a sustainable world, and also contribute to molding a sustainable future by breaking down boundaries and removing limitations. And while that in every context could be important, I think that opens a platform for research libraries to join this field. Also, I would like to put your attention to this very interesting and important article from Nature Sustainability from last year. I think some 35 citizen science researchers from the global community joined up to propose a roadmap on how the citizen science movement can help grow indicators towards the UN sustainability goals. And I think that is an important observation point also for research libraries, who are very good at collecting data, organizing infrastructure, and working with fair data. And right now, my presentation died. Here it came back. Thank you. Very briefly, and as context, at SDU right now, we have a citizen science network. And as you will see in the middle, sort of the hub or organizing this is the university library, together with a number of faculties and faculty employees. On one point, we have researchers who at least are in charge of creating the research questions and the output, but also we have a very strong focus on public engagement. So, as I will demonstrate in a few seconds, and also clearly laid out by Torben, citizen science in Denmark is growing. A number of policymakers, media, NGOs are growing the field from what you could perhaps call more traditional citizen science based in natural science and perhaps biology. And I think we see in Denmark that humanistics, social science, and health science is also developing into at least approaches to citizen science. But what we have right now is by no means a single point of contact. We have a clear focus on citizen science. We have some experiences, but we have not at least yet committed to a single point of contact, but we have begun to make the first strides. So what do we do exactly? And I will get a few examples on what we in the library contribute. But first of all, health science. One of our projects is transforming really the land, the 80 acres of land around the university, into an outdoor living lab in order to get at least 50,000 citizens living in the immediate area and the somewhat 25,000 students and 3,000 employees, researchers, and staff try to be committed to growing this area into activities not designed by researchers or by municipalities, but we have done a quite extensive process on co-creation and received more than 1,000 inputs. And the library role in this have been to do the project management. We have done events, we have done festivals, and we have collected the data and given it and passed it on to the researchers. Also, we have a citizen science project within dementia that has been partners from our university hospital and no less than 4 faculties. Also, an example within humanistics and health science is a project on narrative medicine. And I'm proud to say that we right now are launching another citizen science project aimed at primarily elderly men who are moving into retirement, whether reading groups, online reading groups as an intervention could decrease loneliness and increase motivation to join public events. But we have also done this study where we had one group of doctors and hospital personnel in a public setting discuss what is literature, how could we use it, it's part of the curriculum at SDU. And we also have a group of citizens, crucially not patients, who also committed to this. And we had a very, very good discussion in a public hearing at the end of that. Final project we did was a very large project in 2018 on a number of partners to create electronic waste in order to create a more sustainable world. And we as a university library did most of the communication, project management, collected the data, and passed it on to the researchers as well. This is building into, again, on the literature and on the points that Torben and Christian has made in their research. Would a single point of contact for citizen science be the future at SDU? And what we have done, besides looking into the literature, there are some very good roadmaps also from LIBER, from Leron, and some of the big university associations, but also beginning to look into the insights from the research of Torben and Christian. We did some workshops at SDU for researchers and sort of said, if we could get you to tap into a partnership at our university, where a network, which we have right now, is the most loosely covered, and a research center that you perhaps see at UCL in London, the Excite Center and others, what would you researchers want in order to sort of make a sustainable impact for your research? And the feedback we got, which is a different kind of group that Torben and Christian has advanced, is that the university library in a partnership could be the hub in creating a knowledge center or a research support unit, which aligns perfectly with the literature that we see from Tiberius and Paul. And I think some of the observations that we have got from this, before I present briefly at the end a model of how a single point of contact could look at SDU. Citizen science is growing, it's growing fast, and there is a dire need for advocacy internally and externally. Libraries are and could be suited to do that. We could also be a go-between. Libraries can tie universities and society closer together. A crucial point, which I think Torben and Christian could discuss also in the discussion, citizen science is not one size fits all. There is also a need for library management within research libraries to make a clear commitment to citizen science. And there is a very interesting point to reduce complexity for staff. But again, we have existing competences that could be translated into citizen science, and a really important point, building on the literature of Jarle Golombek and others, There is within public engagement with science, science literacy, which is what is school kids, high school kids, but also citizens potentially learning from going into citizen science, not if they get good grades, but how could they grow a knowledge-centered understanding of science could be a core role for libraries. So at SDU, we believe that the university library, crucially in a partnership, not by its own, could be the gateway between society and universities. And I would be happy to discuss this. There could be a need for libraries to commit to science bridge building, infrastructure, training, and advocacy. But crucially, we should do that with a number of partners, media, NGOs, governance, and decision makers. We could reach out to citizens, civil society, the school system. Also, when building infrastructure, the library, by design, sometimes tend to think we could provide services. But in this case, it's crucial that we work with faculty, that we work with research support units, and also in advocacy, we could partner up with university faculties in order to achieve common goals. Very crucial at the end, some important links to the literature. And with that, Anna, please back to you.
Thank you so much for this presentation, Thomas and Torben. We will now move on. We've seen some interesting questions in the chat box, and we will keep them for the Q&A session at the end of the session. But we will now move on, and I will turn the stage over to Tiberius Ignat from Scientific Knowledge Services, and he is co-writing this paper together with Bertil F. Dorsch from the University of Southern Denmark for their talk entitled Open Science, the Culture, the Movement, the Changes. The floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. I hope you hear me well. Thank you for being here and for making time to attend this event. So we will talk today to, and I also want to thank you to Anna and the LIBER organizers. This is very important to acknowledge because these events are made happening and they are so smooth and so important. The logistic part is also so important. So thank you to the whole LIBER office and for our chair today. We will talk today about open science, the culture, the movement, and the changes. And why is this part of a crowdsources collaboration session? Is because you will see how important is the collaboration in open science. So let's talk about. A bit about who am I? I am Tiberius Ignat, representing Scientific Knowledge Services, a small company which is working with research organizations for disseminating trustful sources of information and for making new roles, for trying to create new roles for libraries in this new economy of research. This presentation is authored by me and Bertil Dorsch from Southern Denmark, the Library of Southern Denmark University, and you will see the contact details also at the end of the presentation. It's a rather long presentation, so I try to see if it's possible to be delivered in this amount of time. Science. First, let's talk about science. Science is a quest for truth. It represents the need to find the truth, the freedom to explore the bizarre, and the right to communicate the inconvenient findings. It is important to establish this framework when we want to speak about the culture of open science. But have we ever found the truth? Do we have any chance to find the truth after all? We have no answer to this. Although we found a way to describe the universe using mathematics, for example, as a language, and triangles and circles and other figures as characters, we are simply running behind the truth. Therefore, we found a kind of a solution to continue to explore the most bizarre corners of the nature and to try to establish findings, no matter how hard it is to accept them sometimes. And this solution is to agree on what we trust. Scientific discoveries are, in fact, I argue, agreements on what we trust. Researchers don't say they find the ultimate understanding of a phenomenon. What they simply say is that they agree on what they trust once they have a new discovery on what they trust. In that sense, science is a humble activity, a quest for truth. We should remain humble because we need to accept that we will not be able to determine the truth. What we'll be able to do is to agree on what we trust and to have comfort for saying today, for example, that red meat is the new white meat, according to nutritionists. Sitting down is the new smoking, according to physiotherapeutics. And the black is the new green, according to those making studies on art. What does it mean? Research is a quest for truth, and trust is the real currency of research. We used to say that reputation is the currency of research. I agree, as reputation is a representation of trust. What does it require? Having a healthy economy based on trust, first of all, it requires transparency. Because we as a society, we are not designed to grant trust. We are designed to acquire trust, to require demonstration before we establish that trust. And that requires, in the end, in order to circulate that currency, that requires transparency. An ingredient of truth is the open disclosure. I would like to illustrate here very quickly with an example of open disclosure, which I would like to promote. And this is the 21-word solution, which reads, as it's written here, we report how we determined our sample size, all data exclusions, if any, all manipulations, and all measures in the study. So this is a 21-word solution, which is required for scientists, if they accept it, to make it part of their open disclosure. If you agree with this, please start promoting it as a solution for research integrity, an element of open science as described by OSPP, research integrity. So to wrap up, before even we start, science is our quest for truth, which we'll probably never find it, but on which we'd at least be able to agree. Science should only be conducted with full transparency and open disclosure, and science is the freedom to explore the bizarre, the right to communicate the inconvenient findings. We should preserve that. Now we jump into the cultural part of the presentation. It refers to research culture and more specific to open science culture. But first, we need to look and to see the open science culture as part of the research culture. This will stretch over the longest time slot of the presentation, and I hope, again, that I will do it in time. Why? Because I simply think that this cultural part of open science hasn't been enough discussed. It hasn't been enough understood or agreed, including the fact that we need to agree on what we disagree. Sometimes I feel that the open science community simply jumped to advocacy, activism, and more rarely to practice, without giving the right respect to the cultural change. We should first make a correction, and that's very important. Open science should be read as open scholarship or open research, because in English, science doesn't mean what it means to all of the others on mainland Europe when we speak about science. But for the convenience, I will refer to open science from now on. Okay, so before we go further, we need to be clear about the secrecy that exists in science. Open science is a cultural change, and no cultural change could be successfully happen if traditions are ignored. And secrecy is a tradition. The open science communication entered in the 16th and 17th century, and previously there were factors that limited the circulation of the knowledge about nature. Pythagorean and Aristotelian traditions, they distinguish between esoteric and popular knowledge, and they restricted the esoteric knowledge to what they call these elite disciples. The Hermetic philosophy then flourished in the Renaissance and then embraced alchemy, among others, and mythical systems and observations, and reserved the secret of nature to what they call the initiates. The guild system discouraged the dissemination of craft techniques because they existed as craft techniques. They banned it to be disseminated beyond the artisan workshop. And the absence of intellectual property rights deterred engineers and inventors of that time to publish their work. Instead, what they did, they composed their treatise in kind of ciphers, as Leonardo da Vinci did when he was writing in the mirror, to foil copycats. Then several developments happened to through the scientific revolution, which combined to overcome, in a way, this secrecy. The technology of printing press, which you all know very well, I'm sure, allowed this wide availability of work. And the Italian city-states, which were already implementing a kind of patent law, were so successful and they proved to be so fruitful that they spread this law throughout the Europe, so that in the 16th century, eventually, it extended throughout the Europe as intellectual creations and copyrights. Finally, the scientific societies, such as the Royal Society of London and the Académie Royale des Sciences in Paris, both found it a kind of a solution, practical solution for disseminating knowledge, and that is the avenue of publications through journals, set as an ideal way of communicating science. Today, secrecy still persists in the modern science in three forms: the personal secrecy, which stems from the reward system of scientific community, which emphasizes priority of individual discovery and encourages scientists to keep unpublished some results for themselves. Otherwise, some colleagues will take them over and then they will take credits for publishing first. Then industrial secrecy, which doesn't need much of discussion. This actually stifled the peer review and fostered duplication in genomics at the end of the 20th century. This industrial secrecy is an important game to look into. And then we have also secrecy related to the relevance of the national security and military interests. So we still have today a lot of secrecy in science. It is important for open science then to deal with these hermetisms. Ignoring it or not understanding it enough, it will be a very, very expensive mistake. In many disciplines, in many projects, science is a kind of a black box. Not in all, indeed. In research fields like astronomy, and thank you, Bertil, for pointing that out, and in big science or in genomics, this box started to become much more transparent during the last years. But for many disciplines, not only this box is black, but it's hard to understand its shape. How comes? Well, this is the case when papers, on the papers that we publish and peer review doesn't offer enough transparency. When the data collection, for example, and the protocol attached to it is not known well enough or made understandable. When the bespoke software, which is used to analyze the data, is not reviewed properly. When is no integrity statement, which at least indicates if the data has been manipulated. When there is not enough transparency to show what experiment materials have been used. If all used devices performed well during the experiment. When the data is not interoperable. When it's hard to find. When it doesn't offer equal chances for being accessed. When licenses are not in place to make clear what can be used and under which conditions. And when the scientific publications are not made available wider, when the results are not disseminated, when the public doesn't feel invited to learn and to become involved in research activities, well, then we'll have this black, unidentified in shape box. This still represents a large majority of research activities. We have still today this box. So we talked a bit about science, just to try to wrap up before we go further. We spoke a bit about the secrecy of science, which is important not to be ignored. Let's speak now a bit about the autonomy of science. Let's speak very briefly. We don't have much time in this. We are still in the research culture section of this presentation. We argue that open science must not be the ultimate goal for transformation to better science. Open science is just, in my humble opinion, a stepping stone to the autonomy of science. I see science as a commissioned activity, presented as thematic and financial frames. We have all these call for projects and call for proposals, in fact, as a commissioned work. These calls were very much improved over the years, I agree, in terms of increased freedom, better evaluations, endorsing inclusiveness, that's important, international cooperation as well, but they still remain a framework for commissioned work. Even worse, in private research and in national security research, science remains strictly a commissioned activity. Is that good? Well, think of that. Science represents a search for truth. It requires at a large degree an autonomy to be able to explore the bizarre, to be able to communicate the inconvenient truth. It should gain its own autonomy. For those up to this task, the real bet is to chase autonomy of science, not open science. Open science remains a stepping stone toward the goal of autonomy of science. At this point, I want to give credit to Vian Laurent. He was interviewed in January this year by Le Monde, and he gave a very inspiring paper. He is a lecturer of the School of Advanced Studies in Social Sciences in Paris. And in his words, it is said that for certain reasons, we no longer have a debate about what science is. And he warmly invites the scientific community to continue to reposition science in society. Please consider reading this interview. It will inspire all of us, I think. It speaks about the autonomy of science. The slides of this presentation will be made available, as I understand, by LIBER office, and you will be able to find this article in Le Monde. So to wrap up once again here, we talked about the culture that stays behind open science. We presented so far our views on science, secrecy of science, autonomy of science, and it's time now to go on the next element, which is the collaboration, and that's why we are here in this session. Part of the research culture is this collaboration. What perspectives brings open science in this front? Well, when science is open, things start to become interesting. The Human Genome Project was a kind of a big deal in the 80s and 90s. Scientists were trying to sequence the DNA. It was a very laborious process, even with that period best technology. But it promised to create the medical miracles. There was actually a kind of a race underway from universities and research institutions, and all sorts of international government-backed collaborations were in place. And they did succeed to sequence the DNA, our human DNA. Yes, I hope you see the video a bit. In March, 14th of March 2000, a legendary satellite conference live broadcasts from Washington and London. It was Bill Clinton and Tony Blair announcing the completion of this first survey of entire human genome. Without any doubts, Clinton said in that day, this is the most important, most wondrous map ever produced by humankind. And since then, we are set to learn a new language next to the one mathematics, which is called the language of the universe, but this time a language for understanding the universe inside of us. But there was something else happening on that conference, 14th of March 2000. US President Clinton and the British Prime Minister Blair popped the biotech bubble when they said that the genome data should be made freely available to everyone. So the effort to decipher, Clinton said, the human genome will be the scientific breakthrough of the century, perhaps of all time. We have a profound responsibility, he said, to ensure that the life-saving benefits of any cutting-edge research are available. These benefits are available to the whole human race. And you see how much the investors like this idea. On the NASDAQ Biotechnology Index, it collapsed as you see here, with that Clinton-Blair statement in just a few weeks. Sellers simply chopped the biotech index almost in the half. Biotech traders heard that freely available line and hit the sell button. They didn't like it. It was smart, of course, but even they didn't know how bad it's going to get. March 2000 turned out to be the Nasdaq all-time high and remained so for another 15 years, 2015. Well, of course, we are now far from that moment and we afford having a laugh, but it was hard on many people. The loss, $50 billion. The bear market had many causes, but Bill Clinton and UK Prime Minister Blair gave it the first punch. Open science is a big deal, and we need to understand that. And it threatens the way society accepts so far the secrecy of science. Never take for granted that the general support for such massive cultural change is simply given to us. The open science movement could be a jolly nuisance for many. The open science changes could be too big for some walks of our life. We need to give respect to that. We should not ignore, and we should not make a mistake to put that away. When science is open to go further, it's probably going to show us the deepest root of open science, the transformation that stays behind it. Certainly is probably to me the most beautiful one. But open science is for all, public, private, non-for-profit, and for-profit research. Don't make that mistake to think that open science is only for public and for non-for-profit. So here is an example. The Structural Genomics Consortium demonstrated precisely that thing. This is a public-private partnership that was created as a collaboration between academia, public funders, and industry. 9 big pharmas are in here, and they use open science methods to enable consistent data and to accelerate reliable discoveries. Why these institutions started this collaboration? Because as a result, the tools and all the molecules developed by SGC are made available freely to everyone willing to work on them. For academics, that means new, robust research. For pharma companies, what it means, benefits because they get the chance to take these new molecules and turn them into drugs. And for clinicians and patients, this is also important because it brings the hope of new medicine. The basic principle they put here is called pre-collaborative competition. Over 70 molecules have been discovered so far, and they are now freely available to be turned into drugs, into post-collaboration competitiveness. Another example, the Cambridge Crystallographic Data Center. It was established over 50 years ago from grant funding. And in a quite relatively short period of time, this funding dwindled. And the industry stepped in. And they were willing to pay the license to have access. Today, it is maintained and developed by CCDC and supports a mixture of revenue, about 70% coming from for-profit private research. The main driver is that the software could be applied to this data center to create better competitiveness advantages. So commercialization is part of open science in that extent. And the third example comes from European Commission COVID data portal. And the aim is to facilitate data sharing, analyze, and to accelerate coronavirus research. And I'm very happy that this portal exists. They try to solve some fast-moving situations that we have here by sharing the data in a coordinated way. Please join me, if you'd like, in a kind of applause, if we can have them digitally, for these great initiatives from European Commission. So to summarize, we have science, secrecy of science. We have been speaking about the autonomy of science and how beautiful the collaboration is and is happening in science. Let's now move to the last element, which is the research culture and how this competition, the competition culture and the research metrics, how they influence the research culture. This is kind of hard to tackle, I would say, for many. But the question is, are the research metrics the root of transformation in open science? This is one thing which is important. Of course, the metrics are measuring the competition. But to make our opinion clear, we think that metrics are good. There's no problem about that. The problem is the lack of balance between the quantitative metrics and qualitative metrics. Neither competitiveness nor collaboration could be measured exclusive through quantitative metrics. Open science is in that sense a cultural change that pushes for more quality metrics. If we all agree that collaboration is essential for modern research, then we need qualitative metrics to enable the measurement of research behavior and achievements on that front. Well, I'm not very much authentic when I raise the perspective of collaboration and competition. I just want to illustrate with two articles published by The Guardian, which illustrate
how... You need to finalize because we only have a minute left. Because we have a third speaker joining us, so we will make sure to have some time. So choose your slide at the end carefully. Thank you so much.
Okay. So what is important also to realize what researcher thinks, and this is a great report from Wellcome that I highly recommend. And then I will move to this part of the presentation, which I will put it as the last. Research culture and the open science, the culture that exists behind open science is not isolated. It's part of other culture in which we exist. And the biggest now in 2000 is the popular culture, which comes with the print, radio, TV, social media, and so on and so on. So if we want to have a transformation in the culture of behind open science, we need to understand that science needs to come closer into our society and to be part of other culture that exists, even sometimes to compete with them. So I know that this is not enough time to deliver such a presentation, and we haven't speak much about the movement and the changes, but I am happy to engage in the Q&A part and speak more about the movement and the changes. Please keep in mind the open science culture hasn't been discussed, in my humble opinion, and I checked that also with Bertil, it hasn't been discussed enough at this point. And we can't move just with activism, with advocacy, if we don't put enough change management in that culture. So thank you once again, and if you would like to engage more in that kind of discussions, please engage through the Q&A session where I will be available. Thank you.
We will. You get a lot of digital applause here. So we will move back and welcome our last speaker, who hopefully will connect with us, although she's spending some time in the mountains, I understood, in Italy. So we won't have you on video, Maria Cassella from University of Turin, but we're very happy that you can join us, and you will give a talk on Transcribing Marconi, a citizen science project involving a research library. So the stage is yours. Very welcome.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well. And this presentation has been conceived with my colleague of the Library of the National Research Council of Potenza. Okay, first of all, citizen science is gaining attention in Europe and in university. In 2015, the European Citizen Science Association published 10 principles on citizen science. Probably you all know this. And in 2016, the League of European Research Universities, which gathers the 23 major research universities in Europe, published a citizen science recommendation and guidelines on citizen science to stress the importance on citizen science for research universities. Later on in 2018, the Citizen Science Working Group of the Open Science Policy Platform published the recommendation on citizen science. And lately, you know, citizen science is one of the 7 pillars of a LIBER open science roadmap. Okay, in Europe, European Union has focused and funded some projects in citizen science. The very first one was Scientize. It's very difficult to pronounce that. Scientize produced 2 outputs, important outputs, a green paper and a white paper on citizen science. More recently, the Doing It Together with Science is another project with, which finished, ended in May 2019, so 1 year ago. And lately, the last funded EU citizens.science, whose aim is to implement.
We're losing you a bit there, Maria. How's your sound coming on? Maria, do you
Hello?
still?
Hello?
Yes,
Yeah?
hello. Welcome
Yeah?
back.
Come
Yes.
back. Okay. So the
Not stable enough, it seems
not
like.
stable, not stable. I'm sorry, I'm
I
terribly
will
sorry.
forward your slide to maybe to the project, so we get to that. Is that fine?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So these are 2 screenshots from the European the last 2 European projects. Now, citizen science is gaining attention. As we will see later. I think there are 3 key drivers in developing citizen science projects in libraries, and you can see them on this slide. An active role in scholarly communication, open science of libraries, of course. A strategic or innovative vision. Citizen science is something different from what we have done to date on open science. Is something involving citizens and public engagement. And of course, another key driver is for libraries belonging to university involved in citizen science project, as researchers are very important partners for libraries in developing citizen science projects. So we need their collaboration. Citizen science and open science are one of the 4 main areas of action in Italy, or what in Italy is called the third mission. And the 4 areas of action of the third mission are public engagement, lifelong learning, cultural heritage activities. This area is very important for Italy, as you all may understand. Libraries are developing many projects, exhibition, virtual tours, Wikimedia projects to share cultural heritage cultural heritage with the citizens and every kind of publics. And then open science and citizen science. And the importance of these activities is also stressed by the Italian National Research Assessment Agency as some performance indicators on academic libraries, public engagement activities were introduced have been introduced in the next national research assessment, which will begin this year in a few months. Okay. Now, I will speak about Italian Research Council very briefly. Italian Research Council libraries are made up 1 central library in Rome, 4 libraries of area, and 80 documentation centers. The library of the area of Portenza offers many ebooks and journals. It is an European documentation center, is a hub for researchers in life sciences and humanities, and develops projects in scholarly communication and open science. Okay, now let's speak about this citizen science project. Transcribing Marconi is a project led by the Italian Research Council of Potenza in collaboration with the library. External partners are the Guglielmo Marconi Foundation and the Accademia dei Lincei of Florence. And they are partners because many documentation of Guglielmo Marconi is preserved by these two institutes. And the aim of a project is to transcribe Marconi's letters, documents, and manuscripts in order to study him both as a scientist and as a human being, in order to stress the importance of Marconi as a scientist, but also as a man. The project has been conceived in 6 steps, main steps. The selection of the documentation. Documentation is mainly in Italian, but as you all know, Marconi lived also in the United States, so some documentation is also in English. Implementation of the web platform on Zooniverse for the crowd-funded transcribing activity. Presentation and communication to the general public, especially to schools. Training activity for pupils and school students. Transcribing activity and evaluation of the results. Okay, these are 2 screenshots just to show you that the project has to date has now arrived as at step 2. Okay, citizen science is not only science, as you all have understood probably by my slides, by my presentation. Transcribing Marconi is not a citizen science project in natural sciences. And this means that a few citizen science projects can be developed also in social sciences and humanities. As a matter of fact, 11% of citizen science projects are devoted to social sciences and humanities. And especially social sciences have many researchers have experience in co-working practice and data gathering, while STM researchers have more experiences and partnership in a life science project, of course. The 2 cultural institutions I cited just before, and with schools, especially with schools. And another important role is selection of the documentation to identify, gather, and select the documents of Marconi documents, which will be a part of a project, will be used to be transcribed. And then engagement with schools. So experience with of the library, of the CNR library of Potenza. With schools and teachers in order to find people, to find public to transcribe the documentation. Training also is another important job for the library, and then the assessment on the project, which will be done together with researchers, of course. And then the final point, citizen science is still in its infancy in academic libraries in Italy, academic and research libraries. We concentrate on other areas of open science. We concentrate on green road, on transformative agreements now, but citizen science is really in its infancy. However, what we have learned from this project, you should have strong synergies with researchers. Researchers are involved in citizen science projects, so you should build a bridge with researchers. You should have a good relationship with them. Then you should also be, as a librarian, as libraries, good partnership with schools, public libraries. Public libraries are very important citizen science project. I think citizen science project started to be developed in public libraries much more than in academic libraries. And then also with scientific museums, and in this particular case, in Transcribing Marconi case, also partnership with archives is very important because we speak of documentation and manuscripts. Then, of course, you should have strong staff motivation. Citizen science is a new topic. Probably there could be resistance on the idea to take part in the citizen science project just because many librarians are engaged in different kind of jobs and other duties. So there might be some resistance. But on the other hand, some people are enthusiastic about the idea of joining and taking part in supporting citizen science. So staff should be also motivated. Of course, you should have a strong attitude in working in innovative projects, in open science projects. And I think last thing, I think is also very important to build and to strengthen the soft skills, the relationship skills that librarians should develop for citizen science and also, of course, for other kind of projects now and in the future. And so my presentation is finished. I was very short, and I hope you could hear me. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Maria. And thank you all presenters for these interesting and thought-provoking talks. You may now turn on your cameras and we will open the Q&A session. Yes, so a kind reminder to our delegates that you can type more questions into the chat box and we will answer them as we move further on. We've had some questions and maybe I will start with Maria if you're still with us. Are you still with us, Maria?
I am with you, yes.
Okay, great. So what has been the most challenging in this project? How many people have contributed in the transcribing activities?
The transcribing activities will begin in a few months because of the coronavirus. Of course, there has been a stop for this project, but the idea is to involve at least three.
You were cut off there. 300,
3,000. 3 classrooms.
3 classrooms.
Yes, 3 classrooms of Portenza area. Okay, 3 classrooms. And the idea is also to involve an archivist, so to pay an archivist, so that the project has been funded with 40,000 euros. And with this money, the idea is to to assume to have an archivist to help with the documentation and manuscripts to help people to transcribe the documentation.
Excellent. Thank you so much. There's been some answers already made in the chat, but Göran Hamrin was asking Tiberius what the definition of qualitative metrics were and why are quantitative metrics the problem. Maybe you want to develop a bit more. Bertil is also on the chat, but maybe you want to answer it live.
So I now see what Elisa was commenting, maybe the, or no, it was still Göran commenting about the using this terminology, quality metrics. Well, I'm not sure if the terminology is the right one, but as I explained, is the narrative that stays behind these research assessment exercises. Having them based in a quantitative metrics on numbers is not enough and doesn't deliver. And if you read this Wellcome Trust report on what researcher thinks, which have been issued this year in January, you will see how much trouble and in what kind of difficult life researchers find themselves because such system. And it is one figure that is important, that researchers, early career researchers as principal investigators have been dropped out dramatically, like the world abandoned them because of these metrics. There's no problem with quantitative metrics. It's the imbalance between them and quality metrics. Maybe I don't use the right terminology, but that means the panel that is evaluating, the peers that is evaluating from different perspectives, the results and the work and how the results has been achieved by a researcher, by a team, by an organization. If Bertil wants to, or anyone else to add something else.
Yes, Bertil.
No, not really. I mean, I think it's mainly a matter of syntax and terminology. Whether you use metrics in a mathematical sense or as a more broad concept. So
in marketing,
do it either way, as long as you say what you're doing and are open.
In marketing, quality metrics are surveys, focus groups, and things like this. These are quality metrics.
Yes. We had some questions earlier on to Torben and Thomas from Konstantin Kokarev. How do you think it's possible to look at promotion of citizen science as a tool of science literacy development? And how do you tell about value of citizen science for researchers within the university? Who would like to develop on that?
I think I could try to answer the last question first, and maybe Torben and others could take over.
Yes.
I think also we have Christian, who is a quite prominent citizen science researcher in himself here, so he could probably at least also answer that. I think that the value from my practical experience working within the university library and the Citizen Science Network is that researchers join citizen science projects for a number of reasons. One, to get better data, to get more representative data, but also in order to achieve a higher social impact. But also, I think it's important here that we are talking about co-created research. And co-created research, you could say it has impact in a number of ways, but it could highlight that the research that are done together with citizens, and citizens is not only as a single citizen, it could be NGOs, it could be policymakers, it has more bearing on representativity in order to be used afterwards. And I think the other part of that question, which is quite prominent at my own university, we seem to be living in some sort of post-factual society. And I think more and more researchers, one, strive to be open and transparent about their research, but also feel that we need to some degree to fight these non-knowledge-based decisions that seem to be going on in society. So there are a number of reasons also that I learn in practice almost every day from researchers to join citizen science projects.
Well, I can add some few reflections on this. I think that young researchers who are already keen on open science and involved in in open science project can be easily also involved in a citizen science project, as a citizen science is a part of open science. Of course, it depends also from which kind of research they're doing, because citizen science is very useful in some kind of projects. It may be less useful for other kinds of projects. So it depends on what they are doing, or on what they are interested in. I think so. I mean.
Yes, thank you. Christian, you wanted to.
Yes, so thanks very much for that question. I would just like to add, so in the chat, I added a link to a report by the National Academy of Sciences, who says that citizen science is good both for research and also for science learning. Then I would add, in the survey that Torben reported, we also asked researchers about what they see as possible goals for citizen science. And we also asked them about, let's say, more democratic aspects. So would citizen science help or empower research citizens to gain knowledge and to engage in discussions that has a kind of a science foundation or is related to scientific knowledge? And they actually seem to agree that this is also a potential for citizen science. And I think that because citizen science has so many different aspects and actually has potential in a lot of different ways, not only for doing research, science learning, but also for more democratic purposes. I think this idea of having an institutionalization of citizen science, so that it's more than just a number of different projects running, but there's actually a single point of contact where you can that can develop this full potential of citizen science in respect to many different things. I think that's very important. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Any other of the speakers would like to add anything? Yes, go ahead.
Just to illustrate with an example, when UK signed the Kyoto Protocol, they cited two studies which involved citizen science for bird watching, which spanned over 54 years, each of this year bringing more than 30,000 observations. So they cited two studies which were published in peer-reviewed journals in big big publishers' journals. If I don't want to necessarily speak the name. And then when they signed the Kyoto Protocol, the UK government had in mind this work brought by citizens. So it was such relevant for them, so relevant for them.
Thank you. I think we often hear about new roles for libraries. So why should this particular one, being a single contact point for citizen science, be prioritized amongst all the other new roles? Is it on the expense of other outdated roles, or could you elaborate? Have you had those kind of discussions within your universities? Yes, Bertil, please go
And
ahead.
I can try at least. So it was a little bit of leading question. But I mean, one part of that answer in that narrative could be that it kind of encompasses a lot of different things at the same time. There are many different aspects of citizen science that you address, maybe even solve or support at the same time. So SDGs and the UN goals, for instance, the openness of science, the transparency of science, the public engagement in science, addressing societal needs. You require an infrastructure that gives you and what do you call it? Reasons for developing data management and engaging with co-creation with research environments and society. So there are many different things that you address at the same time that you could, of course, you could go for them alone, but that would be in some kind of context. and what would that context be? And I think a good context is under the umbrella of citizen science, really. So integrity as well, research integrity is something also, public trust in science. So many different things that is addressed in this common under this common umbrella.
Yeah, great. Many good arguments there for any library who wants to take on this new role. Christian, please, and then Tiberius.
Yes, so thank you. I think you're pointing your finger at a very sore spot, in fact, because what we also asked about in our survey was actually this prioritization, and whether the employees at research librarians thought that they had enough resources, financial resources, but also let's say competencies for carrying out these activities and being this institution of citizen science. And I think that there's something that needs to be addressed, right? So we need to think about whether it fits into the overall let's say portfolio of research libraries, whether it doesn't need to be one size fits all. It's not that every research library should have a single point of contact for citizen science, because it can be in many different parts of the research institutions. But we do see here potential. I mean, if the research library wants to make a priority of citizen science and see that there are potentials for research libraries to enter this, then we certainly have a good case for it, I think. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Tiberius?
So when in 2000, we have this recommendation from 2016 made by LERU, the League of European Research Universities. In 2016, they recommended the citizen science single point of contact. So who was about to step in for this recommendation if it recognizes as valid? And libraries, we at least some people working with citizen science, we recognize that libraries could step in, but this is not mandatory. It very much depends on the strategy of that library. What is the strategy of that library? We have examples like UCL in London, for example, which has part of that, their strategy in their library is the public engagement, engaging with the public outside of university. And for them, citizen science and the citizen science single point of contact made sense in that strategy. But otherwise, the question of priority that you, Anna, asked for, it is related to the strategy of that library. Some libraries are trying to move to more scholarly communication hub, some others even more to open science hub. And for those, citizen science single point of contact could be a solution for some of their strategic directions. So it's a matter of strategy.
Yeah, thank you. Torben as well, please go ahead.
No, oh, sorry, I was just out of the session for a moment, so
okay, sorry, then it's Thomas.
Yeah.
Just a very brief comment, because I think when we talk about single point of contact in libraries, there is a potential misunderstanding we should clear up. It's not for libraries to have a monopoly on citizen science. It's very, very important and a very crucial thing for libraries to join in partnerships with researchers, with faculty, with civil society, with all kinds of actors, policymakers. And libraries are very, very suited for this. At least our own understanding could be that, okay, libraries push knowledge across and have done it for potentially thousands of years. So if we want to move on, and I totally agree with Bertil, which is quite lucky because he happens to be my boss, that integrating libraries, we are trying to strive that way and have done it for a number of years, integrating ourselves and doing facilitation of research. We have a unique possibility to do that, but we can only do it in a partnership. Thank you.
Yeah, Maria mentioned collaboration with the public libraries. Is that something you also do in Denmark? And then we have, yeah, please go ahead.
We are sorry.
Maybe Maria first, yes.
Well, in Turin, I live in Turin. I am a director in Turin of an academic library. We are trying to develop a strategy on open science together with public libraries. and I should say also with the help of LIBER. Yes, so speaking about open science, for me, it means also speaking about citizen science. And I think public libraries are very well positioned to support citizen science. In some cases, even more.
Yes, we will let you two must continue there since we lost Maria, unfortunately.
Very briefly, public libraries are everywhere. They're very close to citizens. They are very, very good at communicating and connecting with local community and local citizens. Public libraries could be a crucial actor in citizen science. So I think with that, we are trying, at least at home, to bridge build and do a partnership with them as well. But I would point to our very good colleagues at IBLIDA, who had done a great job at their website in trying to do and build a matrix also for funding and opportunities for citizen science and public libraries.
Excellent. We will get that link up in the chat. There's Radovan Vrana, who's also saying that public libraries are great support for open science. So if you have a question or an example, please type it in. Yes. Anything else you would like to address before we wrap up? Beris, you had a couple of slides left. Are there anything about management and change that you would like to end with?
Well, the most important one, as I said, is to try to move in with the open science movement, to try to move from activism and advocacy, which are great activities, but alone they will not deliver, to try to move to change management, to find resources. There are also some misunderstandings. There are misaligned agendas. If we are looking to how in Europe the OSPP platform started, it was endorsed by the Competitiveness Council. And it's written there right next to the definition, their definition of open science. It is written that for Europe to remain competitive, and then we need open science and so on. And by the way, the final report of OSPP has just been published last month, and I highly recommend to everybody to get it and read it and discuss it. So it is an important part of the open science to understand these different agendas. Is the researcher agenda, which wants to finish in a way with p-hacking of data and dredging the data, and with their problems in career, advancing in career. Then is the agenda of the funder, which is looking to open science as a solution to accelerate the transfer to society from what we research into products and services. And then it's another agenda which is putting somehow open science as a sugar coat for open access, with which I totally disagree. Open science didn't start it with open science didn't start it with open access, not at all. So open science is not a sugar coat for open access.
No, that's a good way of ending it. Great. Thank you, all presenters, and thank you, all delegates, for bearing with us through our bit of a technical problem. We appreciate you being here. We will be sending you this survey that I mentioned in the beginning because we want to learn. And please fill it out so we can improve for future LIBER conferences. And we will also send a link to the recordings and the slides. Thank you again for joining us today, and enjoy the remaining of your LIBER conference. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.